So I'd like to invite Amy
Hi,
to
I'm
join.
here.
Yeah.
I can't seem to turn on my video, but I am here.
Okay. So I'm wondering if you wanted to turn your video on. Um,
No worries. I mean, I can't just chat.
yeah. It's true. Uh, I gave her cat best wishes. Okay, so there's lots of cats here. I don't know whose other cat's here. I think Spring had a cat. So Amy, welcome. Perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm Dr. Amy Kavanagh, which is Kavanagh for the interpreter. And I am a disability activist from the UK. And I was very kindly asked to join you today. It's mid-afternoon here in London. And yeah, so it would be great to understand what you'd like me to talk about. I'm happy to waffle on for 2 hours. I've got a few things I can speak to. But yeah, I'm really pleased to be here. And this is an excellent movement and, really important issues to discuss. And so I'm happy to talk about different activism. So yeah, let me know.
Well, I think what we were, I want Spring to maybe, Spring was reading Judy Huseman's, some of her narrative of her own history, and a lot of different things came up there about, parents who in the early 1950s, when there was polio, a lot of parents of children who had polio had to be really advocating for their children to go to school, to participate in society. And also, Judy mentioning too, historically, how, if she was born earlier, and if she was living in Germany, she probably would not have survived. And so I think that history of activism within families, and also then how for Judy later on, her activism became much more broader than that, along with different civil rights and other rights that might parallel what has happened also in Britain. So kind of wanted to have a kind of just general discussion with Spring and with Amy around how that history maybe in Britain, how there was similarities or difference in Britain to what occurred in the United States, and also what occurred in Canada as far as the rights, disability rights movement.
So I'm the grand age of 31. So I was actually kind of born during that first battle for a Disability Rights Act in the UK. We had something called the Chronically Sick Persons Act in 1970. And that was just very much about medical care and a little bit about pensions. So not kind of full rights to participate in society. And similarly to the ADA in the States, the real movement for the UK culminated in the Disability Discrimination Act, which became law in 1995 and was the result of direct action by a lot of disability activists at the time, and just celebrated the 25-year anniversary of that, actually. And there were lots of great news stories, some familiar faces chaining themselves to buses. And the Disability Discrimination Act was the first law in the UK about discrimination. It was about, people being discriminated against in work or transport or the provision of goods and services. And crucially, it also contained the right to education, which did not previously exist. And this was part of a lot of work by families to have mainstream education for disabled children. And it was also a big watermark in shifting kind of perceptions of disability from sort of a medicalized and individual issue to more of a human rights or a civil rights issue. And more of those kind of stories started being told about disability and exclusion. So that, you know, I was 6. I don't really remember it. I was in school. I think I was mainly, you know, playing with crayons. But it did guarantee my rights to education in school. I went to a mainstream school. So a bit about me. I was born with my visual impairment. So I have a rare genetic condition, which is called ocular albinism, which is OCULARALBINISM. Ocular albinism. And it is a form of albinism. That's why if you could see me, you would be seeing that I'm blonde. It's mainly about the way that my eyes and my brain are linked, and that I'm very sensitive to light, and I'm registered blind. So yeah, that's kind of my disability, and I've always had my disability. And so I grew up being very treated like a non-disabled child, which, you know, was a double-edged sword in a lot of ways. And I did go to mainstream school. I didn't get much support. My parents eventually took me out and put me into a private school, which confusingly in the UK we also call public school, but that's a paid for fees school, which, you know, didn't really get much support there either. And then I kind of decided that the best solution was just to massively overqualify myself. So I went all the way to PhD. So I got a doctorate in history, and it's kind of my now niche interest area. But I spent many years, over a decade at university studying for that. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a bit about me. I didn't really get involved with disability activism until I was in my mid-20s. And it was because mainly through mental health stuff and experiencing poor mental health during my PhD. And I started talking about it online. And then I connected with more disabled academics and found more and more disabled activists online, and really got into activism that way. So when I think about legislation and stuff, you know, I am quite privileged in that I benefited from a lot of the hard work of other people. And yeah, I suppose that's kind of an introduction to me. I wondered if you had any specific questions. I can talk a little bit about the Equality Act, which was the legislation which overturned the Disability Discrimination Act. So
yeah, no, that would be great. And also, because I know in the UK there is a really great Equality Act that allows for work equality, etc. That I think in the UK, I'm thinking about a colleague here, Alex Bulmer, who was in theater, and the Work Equality Act there allowed her to have assistance to help her work. She is also someone who has low vision as well. But I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to where things stand in the UK with respect to assistive dying, and if you could speak to that, and also the reaction of disabled people in the UK to what's happening in Canada as well.
To be honest, it's not really my area of expertise.
No, that's okay.
And so we have had various bills that and have had those discussions in the UK. And there has been really strong movement by disability activists as part of that. They're not something I have been involved in per se. I did try to engage with some of the people that had been involved in that to invite them along today, but obviously with it being, you know, quite a difficult time with the pandemic, I couldn't really connect people in time to do it. But yeah, I think it's not it's not, as far as I am aware, something that is imminent in the UK. It is still being discussed at political levels, but we don't have anything before Parliament, and the discussions and cases that have happened have often been about people with long-term conditions and people who have advocated for themselves. So there have been famous cases where individuals have gone to court and said, I personally would like to have assisted dying. And those cases have not been successful. So I think that's sort of where we are. It's something that's discussed a lot. I think really the pandemic has brought it into a worrying focus, because that means that we have had things like do not resuscitate orders put on people without their consent. That has been a big issue during the pandemic, especially people with learning disabilities have discovered, and their families have discovered, that a do not resuscitate order has been put on their medical records with no consultation or warning or discussion. And that there's been real backlash about that. At the beginning of the pandemic in April, the government had to issue a letter to the doctors in the NHS to say, hi, please don't do this. We've not told you to do this. Why are you doing that? It's not acceptable. There was also real concern that we had a frailty scale published. And this frailty scale was like scoring people out of 9 or 10. And it listed different stuff like, can you get out of the house independently? Do you need support eating? Do you need support with washing? And depending on your support needs, they were going to give you a score out of 9, and that would determine whether or not you got a ventilator.
Oh my goodness.
So that has been more of a subject of conversation recently around quality of life and the kind of medicalized approach, because it was quite quickly pointed out that somebody can have very high level needs. They can have very high level needs of care, but that does not mean that they are ill or that they were vulnerable to the virus. So, for example, someone who is autistic or has a learning disability or an intellectual or cognitive disability, they are not frail just because they have support needs. And so there's that.
Amy, I'm going to stop you just for a second, because I think Spring wants to join our conversation. Spring, you had your hand up there. Did you want to jump into the conversation here?
Hi, I was actually just going to tell you that I need to step out for a bit, but I wanted to say hello to Dr. Kavanagh virtually, because I think we're mutuals on Twitter, and it's really amazing to hear you speak. And thank you for being a part of the Disability Filibuster. Very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be following along as best I can throughout the day, but I need to sign off now.
Okay, thanks so much, Spring, for being here. Thank you very much. Take care.
Since we're at an intermission, Karen, may I jump in too?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Hi, Amy. It's Catherine Fuzzy. I'm really delighted. It seems not. I am delighted, but we're also honored, as Spring said, that you have joined us today, and really listening intently to some of your reflections on the history that gets us to where we are, I suppose. I'm doing double duty as a terribly incompetent technical host of the gathering right now, and I think in order to permit you.
Oh, it's me. I'm here.
Maybe I it.
My face. Here's my face.
Wonderful. Well, okay. There we go. All right.
It's me.
I think the problem is solved.
I'm waving
Yeah.
vigorously.
Yeah, you are. And so is the interpreter. Yeah. Well, I can't, but Pat, you can wave your hand in front of my face. Just right there. There we go. I'm waving back vicariously.
Great.
Okay.
I'm gonna jump in here. This is Q, and I just woke up and jumped on the call, but I can do hosting duties probably a bit better than Catherine
Yes,
can.
maybe just a bit.
Catherine, if you are able to make me the host,
Absolutely.
I can
And
take
with
over from
great
here.
pleasure. I hope
Hi,
you had,
Amy. Yeah.
I hope you had a good rest, Q, and
I
thank you
did.
for relieving me of my humiliation. Amy, I'm gonna still be here listening though.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna mute. I'll do the thing that I need to do for Q, and you will be in great hands. So mute
Thank
first.
you. I'll just do a little description of myself now that other people can see me. I am a white woman. I'm a plus size woman. I have blonde hair. I'm wearing a black headset, which is kind of on one ear and has a little microphone. Wearing a pink cardigan, which is very on brand. And behind me on my shelves, I have all sorts of interesting things. I'm just bending down so they're a little bit clearer. I stream video games from this room. So I have behind me all sorts of paraphernalia from Star Wars and little figurines of video game characters. I have a Lord of the Rings rubber duck. And I've got one of my white canes is on a shelf behind me. And sometimes the fairy lights come on behind me, but not always. They run out of battery. So yeah, that's what's going on over here. Oh, and I'm wearing glasses as well. And I do have next to me, who I know will be a treat, I do have guide dog Ava next to me, who is asleep. Let me see if I can rouse her a moment, because who doesn't like to see a dog? Oh, hang on. There we go. You're going to get, here she is. This is guide dog Ava having a nap. There she is. She's just been in the park. So she's very sleepy. Ava, there she is. Why are you waking me up from my nap? Why are you waking me up from my nap? I was in the park and then I was sleeping. So yeah, she's a very good girl, and she's my mobility aid, and she's pretty darn cute. So she always likes to make an appearance. So she's going to go back to sleep now.
She's a darling. She's a darling, Amy. Oh my gosh, she's so cute.
No problem. Do our interpreters need to swap or anything? I can stop waffling for a second.
Yeah. No, they seem to think they're okay for now. Okay, that's great. That's great. It's very interesting you're talking about this frailty scale, because in fact, I think the Ontario government has taken the frailty scale and to either adapt it to, because of COVID, to again use the same principle about who is going to get a ventilator, but in a provincial government in Ontario, using the frailty scale in which to decide who is going to get treatment and who isn't going to get treatment. And a lot of these things are colliding together about who's valued, who isn't valued, and trying to arbitrarily use a scale that has no basis for deciding who should be getting treatment or not. I don't know if you want to comment on that. You mentioned it, that they've been using that for ventilators during the COVID.
So there was the threat that it would be used. So obviously in the UK, we have a public health system. We have the NHS, which is free at point of use for everybody, unless you are you will get emergency treatment for free, but they're increasingly charging people who are not resident in the country costs. But in principle, everything should be free. And the message at the beginning of the pandemic, and whenever we've had peaks or high infection rates, has been, well, if the NHS gets overwhelmed, then we'll have to prioritize who gets treatment and who gets a ventilator. And so that has been really frightening, because there have been points where, you know, we have had hundreds of people dying a day. We have per capita one of the worst infection and death rates in the world. And, you know, we're not a huge country. So it's been very frightening, the lack of planning and support, and even really basic stuff at the beginning of the pandemic around access to, you know, personal protective equipment for people with carers and support workers in their homes, testing. It's been really difficult for disabled people and their paid carers to get testing. So the combination of, well, we're not going to prioritize you for a ventilator, but we're also not going to give you masks and gowns and tests and vaccines has been really difficult in the UK. And it's left many people very worried about how this has exposed some issues that we always knew were there, and how those attitudes, which, you know, the minute a crisis hits, suddenly it's like, well, these people get pushed down the list. And should similar legislation come to the UK, that's why we're really worried, as you are, because it is revealing these medicalized views of disability. So yeah, I think, you know, there were cases of people being told about the frailty scale being used, but like I don't think in the end the decisions were made because there were not necessarily points reached where the services were so overwhelmed that they started deploying those kind of decisions at a structural level. I mean, individual decisions on a case-by-case basis may well have happened, and there have certainly been cases recently in the newspaper. So, for example, a deaf gentleman was denied a lot of care and support and communication support in hospital during the pandemic, and this resulted in him passing away because of that lack of support and information. And there has also been, we have a yearly review into the deaths of people with intellectual disabilities, and there has been a huge spike in those deaths during the pandemic. And again, it's kind of brought out those conversations around, you know, why is this group more vulnerable? It's not, you know, it's not a physiological thing. It's because people are in group care settings, or because they are not supported to live healthy lives, or, you know, get exercise or eat, you know, so perhaps instances of comorbidities, so diabetes and all these conditions, that actually this is about a quality of care, not about a condition or an impairment. And so that's brought up some real conversations in that area as well around, you know, are we setting people up to fail essentially health-wise, and the real health inequalities that many disabled people experience, even when healthcare is free.
Right, right. I mean, we're certainly experiencing, Karen here again, Amy, that similar things of lack of PPE for disabled people and attendance, even though asking for those supplies, and even the prioritization now for vaccines. There has been nothing around prioritizing people with disabilities for vaccines as well. Mm-hmm. So you're right. I think what's happened with COVID, it has exacerbated already the devaluation of disabled people, and and this is showing up, unfortunately, so clearly. And this seems to be unfortunately a worldwide phenomenon here that we're experiencing. What are some of the resistive kind of activity that's going on in the UK disability community to try and work together to try and push back on some of this lack?
I mean, it's been all over, really. As ever, it's often the larger charitable organisations that push a lot. But I'm certainly part of groups that have been taking a variety of actions, from cases against the government. So one instance we had that really kind of summarized the British approach to inclusion at the government level was the government refused to have a British Sign Language interpreter at government briefings. So an interpreter was eventually available on the news channel, but not on the main channel, the main TV channel. It was only on the news channel, which means you have to have a TV with that channel on it to watch it. And the interpreter was not in the room or was not broadcasting live from that space. They were receiving a video feed, which I'm sure, as our lovely ASL interpreters here could tell us, is really challenging. And there was a huge battle about that, and petitions and questions in Parliament, and government just refused to do it. They said, oh, well, it's on the news channel. And, that's enough of an accommodation. That's a workaround. They liked to use the excuse that the room was too small to have an interpreter in. And people did suggest that perhaps they could use a different room, given that they have an entire Palace of Westminster to choose from. So that's been one example of the kind of legal work. So there was a legal challenge around that the government just kept fobbing off. There have also been legal challenges around things like testing prioritization. It's been difficult because certainly between March and, well, even until January, legislation was changing every day. Like every day there was a new policy, a new directive. The level of incompetence has been shocking. So at Christmas, we were all told, the country was told before Christmas, 2 weeks before Christmas, we were told, yes, it's safe. Families can meet up. You can meet up with your family and you can spend 3 days with your family, and that's safe and that's fine. And then 3 days before Christmas, the government went, oh, actually, no, you can't see your family. You can't go inside to someone else's house. And that was obviously the right decision, but it's that level of last minute incompetence that has been so difficult to deal with. And just disabled people being constantly left out of every policy, from education. They didn't think about special schools and how they would support disabled children. They're called special schools in the UK. It's a very annoying euphemism. They didn't think about group homes and care facilities for younger people. All the policies were about aged care. And they didn't think about the testing and how it might be inaccessible. So, all the testing was drive-through for ages, which obviously, I can't drive, so I can't get there. So there's been a lot of collective action around just trying to get disabled people just fitted into these policies and these changes, and just advocating and advocating and advocating with MPs, with the press, and everyone, I think, has been fighting a bit of a personal battle, and people have been very exhausted, and so often their priorities have rightly been, well, I need testing for my care staff, or I need PPE for me, I need to fight my own battle for my vaccine. But I would say vaccines is the ongoing big issue at the moment. And there's a big campaign called Left Off the List. The way it's worked in the UK and the way we've had it prioritised is that people have been put into groups. So the first group were over 80s, people over the age of 80, and people living in, older people living in a care home or a nursing home. Then it just kind of went down a couple of age brackets. So then it was, over 75, over 70, over 65. And then with the kind of people in their 60s, they were also grouped with people with long-term health conditions or disabilities that had been put on the shielding list. So back in March and over the summer, people received a letter from their doctor or from their local government to say, you have a condition or you have medical needs that put you at significant risk of the virus. And therefore they were told to stay at home and they could not leave their house. They were told they must not leave their house. The rest of the people leave their house, and that they should get, shopping left outside their house. And they were told to do this for 2 months, but many people have now been doing it for a year. And people are able to access the vaccine if they were on that list. They've been put into what's called Group 6. If they're on that shielding list, if they got that letter, and some more people were added and some people weren't, that's like that's like Willy Wonka's golden ticket, that if you're on that shielding list. That group also included family carers, unpaid carers. So actually my partner had his vaccine because he is on my medical records as my carer. I haven't had a vaccine yet, and I probably won't until the rest of the general population, because actually I have no health conditions. I'm no more vulnerable than another slightly overweight person in their 30s. So that's fine with me. But there are many people who have chronic illnesses or more complex medical conditions that, they don't fit into that nice, neat, give me a vaccine box. And therefore, they have been left off this list. And because it's all being done with a weird combination of like a centralized government initiative, but also your local doctor, your general practitioner. And I have had friends who called their doctor and said, I have been on this shielding list. I had this letter. Please, can me and my partner, who is my carer, have the vaccine? And one doctor's surgery has said, oh no, we're not doing your group yet. You can't have it yet. And then they've called a doctor from their kind of childhood home, who is their family doctor. And they've gone, oh yeah, that's no problem. Just come up here and we'll give you an injection. So it's a real kind of postcode lottery with the vaccines. And people who, have had, say, chemotherapy or cancer treatment during the pandemic were not on those lists at the beginning, and now they can't get on those lists. And it's just like administrative disasters around people's lives, right? But I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new. And I know everyone is going through this same situation. But a lot of the kind of collective activism is around this particular campaigning issue at the moment, to get vaccines and to not just be left in the general population if you have those particular needs, which I don't. So I'm fine.
So thanks, Amy. I mean, everything you're saying, it's Karen again speaking. We are having, it's scary to see the parallel problems across countries. The same thing, if you were in long-term care retirement, that's great. It's well needed that people need to be vaccinated, but probably like in the UK, as in Ontario, there are other senior congregate kind of facilities, and they are not, because they're not designated as long-term care retirement, they are not being prioritized. I'll just give an example. My mother lives in a seniors, in a residence with assistive living, but it's not designated as long-term care or a retirement home. She's 94. The average age of people in this home is probably 85. And they have not, while the director has made it known to the Scarborough Health, to the network, the hospital network near them, they have still not been have vaccines come to them. And of course, they have people in this particular resident that are over 100. So they're not going to be able to go out to a hospital lineup. So they're going to have people sent, a vaccination mobile team sent to them. So you're right, there are these lists, and if you fall through the cracks, it's kind of too bad. We're having to figure out how you're going to get back on the list. So we have, unfortunately, very scarily to hear similar issues. It is extremely scary to hear that there is the same level of not being aware of where people with different vulnerabilities, and trying to make sure that everyone who needs to have a shot sooner than later should be having it. So I wonder if we wanted to go back to the issue of how history, because history is your topic, and I'm so happy I'm on this segment with you, because I've done a little bit of oral history. I'm not a historian like yourself. But how the history, and how in Canada, for example, the fact of trying to legislate this Bill C7, how it further legitimizes the discourse that disabled lives are not worth living or are not valued. I wonder if you could maybe speak to that from your perspective, and from your historical perspective as well.
Well, I mean, I haven't been a historian for a while, Karen, but I can try my best. And my history was mainly about 19th century British India, which, is niche. I would say, for me, there are long-standing ideas in the UK about the deserving and the undeserving poor. And that really, in my opinion, dates back to the 17th century vagrancy laws. And these laws were put in place to deal with itinerant and transient populations, often people who had been in the military, or people who were from traveller communities. And as more social mobility existed during that time and after the English Civil War, you had large community groups that would move from area to area, and they would be known as vagrants. And so laws were put in place to prevent those kind of people from accessing assistance from the church, from the parish, or from the local authorities. And it literally put into legislation back then the idea of deserving and undeserving poor. And I genuinely think that that mindset continues to apply in the UK, because in 2010, when we got a Conservative government and had the austerity of a global recession, and the Conservative government put in place very strict austerity measures that very much stripped back the welfare state and assistance, in particular for disabled people. And over the last decade, this has had a devastating impact on disabled people. And it has made the welfare state in the UK very punitive. And to get disability support, to get that financial support, it is now a very traumatic experience for most people. It's a very kind of testing and punishing and proving yourself. You have to lay yourself bare, because they changed the mechanism for disability benefits. And this changed from something called the Disability Living Allowance, which myself included, many people got a lifetime award. So you would be judged through a paper form and whatever your doctor said, and they would say, yes, Amy, she's a blind child, she'll always be blind, her eyes aren't magically going to grow differently, she can have this amount of money for the rest of her life to support with the costs of her disability. But the Conservative government decided that that meant people were scamming the system, And they used the press in the UK in particular to paint a vision of what would be called benefit scroungers or benefit cheats. And there were countless stories in tabloids, ridiculous things like, man on disability benefits is filmed wrestling a crocodile, but is claiming that he can't walk. And, all this kind of really ridiculous stuff that was, very exceptional cases and, really created this idea and this impression in the UK that nearly everyone who was on disability benefits was trying to kind of game the system. And this narrative empowered the government to change the benefits to something called the personal independence payment. And this is a really punitive process. And they subcontracted the process to a lot of private providers so that people will go and have assessments with somebody who has, attended a 3-day training course rather than a medical professional. And, just countless horror stories, constant horror stories about people who are wheelchair users being commanded to walk, people having their bodies touched inappropriately, inappropriate sexual questions, people being asked if their autism is contagious, just real horror stories from this process. And unfortunately, the aim of this process is to award as few as possible people this benefit. And also, you have to constantly be reassessed. And there is a very good advocate, a gentleman called David Williams, who's a good friend of mine. And he is a double amputee. And he's a wheelchair user and has a prosthesis for his legs. And every 3 years, the government contact him to say, we need to reassess your disability to see if you still need this money. And every year he replies, I am not a salamander. My legs cannot regrow. And, this is the level of, what this situation is like, because people who do have lifelong conditions, his legs are not going to regrow, his needs are not going to change really, then have to go, if they want to continue to receive the financial support, if they obviously need that financial support for the costs of their disability, they have to undergo through this humiliating process of justifying their disability and their needs and their existence. And there is a similar process for employment-related support. So the personal independence payment is supposed to be used for things like wheelchair maintenance, or I use my money for taxis because I can't drive, things like that are directly related to your disability. But if you apply for benefit support because you are unable to work due to your disability, that's a whole other pile of humiliation. And so it's really contributed to this narrative of value and worth. And unfortunately, studies have shown that this narrative, actively encouraged by the government, by media, has resulted in increases in hate crime for disabled people in the UK. There are tangential studies that prove that attitudes have changed to the extent that certain words and the idea of being a benefits cheat or, being undeserving of support or faking your disability. There's a lot of kind of hate crime around that in the UK. And that all contributes to this idea of worth and value and who deserves support and who deserves healthcare and who deserves vaccines. And, something that's been coming out and lots of people have been sharing on social media is waiting in a vaccine queue. And because it's been mainly age-based, although people with health conditions are now getting the vaccine, being stood in that queue or turning up at the doctor's surgery and someone saying, well, there's nothing wrong with you. Why are you getting it? Why are you getting it? what's your disability? What's your health condition? And people being quizzed about, why they're entitled to a vaccine, or having to go through similarly humiliating, like conversations with doctors' receptionists to say, please, can I speak to the doctor? They understand my health condition. And the receptionist saying, oh, well, you're only, 29. You just wait like everybody else. And people, vaccines are apparently the latest kind of scam that disabled people are allegedly pulling, which is really difficult and really painful for people who've already gone through so much in the last year to then be accused of faking their disability. I get quite regularly accused of faking being blind. It's quite a common form of hate crime in the UK because of this narrative, because for a decade, tabloid newspapers have encouraged people to think that most disabled people are pretending, and that they're pretending for financial gain. And kind of the narrative that we have that is often talked about in activist communities in the UK is that there are two models of disability in Britain. You're either a benefit scrounger or you're a Paralympian. Like, that's it. Those are the only options. Can't just be a normal person. So I think for me, that has really fed into these ideas of, it's not just about whether your disability gives you quality of life from this medicalized perspective. It's also this presumption that you are inherently deceitful, that you must be gaming the system for your advantage, and therefore that operating quite often from that position of not believing people. And you can, in my experiences of hate crime and many of my friends, it's the language used. People will call you a scrounger. People will say, oh, people like you fake, so you don't have to work, and all this kind of language. And that really contributes to the idea of whose life is worth something. And that you're a burden on the system is a big narrative as well. Like, you're a burden on the system and you're trying to scam the system.
Right.
Is something that comes up a lot in kind of discussions around hate crime. And I think that historically has contributed to the situation that we're in right now.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I mean, yeah, there's so many intertwining narratives, negative narratives that contribute to what we're seeing today. I wondered if you want to, we've had the UN rapporteur speak out about what's happening in Canada, and how it is really directly, contradicting to us being a signature on the Convention of Rights for People with Disabilities. And it's interesting how our government does not seem to be able, that contradiction doesn't seem to exist in their heads. They don't see anything problematic with that. Having the discussion, well, yes, when we have young disabled people, yes, we're going to give resources, but no, end of life, no, we want people, you go ahead. This contradiction does not seem to be resonating with government. They don't seem to see the hypocrisy in that. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, in 2019, the UN reported that the UK was actively violating the human rights of disabled people. They specifically said, I'm trying to find the quote here, the UK has violated its human rights obligations through sustained and widespread cuts to social support. And in the UK, over half of people living in poverty are either a disabled person or come from a family that has a disabled person. So government, they denied all of this. When this happened here in the UK, they'll just spout figures like, oh, we're trying to employ this many people, or, we've increased this thing or that thing. I'm certainly, it might be quite obvious from this conversation, but I am no fan of our current government. And I do not think they value disabled people as equal citizens. And not only do they not value them, they have been demonstrated to actively work against our equal participation in society. And, you know, at the moment, we are having a national survey of disabled people where the government is hearing all of our views, including essential questions like, do you want to have, how have they put it? There's a question on the survey that says, are you interested in, or would you be happy to have an intimate relationship with a disabled person? Yes, no, maybe. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're quite a few activists are quite cross about that, but you know, this survey is very top level. It's all kind of what I would call fluffy stuff. So it's all attitudes and social isolation, which is obviously very important to talk about. But you know, the survey doesn't talk about care needs. It doesn't talk about justice. It's all that kind of top level cultural stuff that is important, but also very conveniently, it's hearts and minds, right? So it's views, it's opinions, it's feelings, rather than tangible policy change. And it's very tokenistic. It's very tokenistic. And apparently we're expecting some, you know, disability strategy that'll come out of it, which has long been called for in the UK. Now, again, I think it's going to be things like, all shops will have a Happy Disabled People Day. You know, it's going to be that kind of thing. It's not going to be proper legislation, proper change, proper equality. It'll be, we're all going to, like, everyone is going to wear a sticker and think about blind people for a day. You know, it's going to be that kind of thing. It's not going to be real change.
Yeah.
And it's hugely infuriating to see how globally, as you say, you know, the UN can turn up and say, hi, you're violating human rights, and governments don't care. You know, and that's why this is important. This is why we need collective global action, right? This is why I'm here today, because I believe that the only way we're going to actually get listened to is if we remind governments that there are billions of us, and that actually the change that we're calling for is important globally, and the change you are trying to call for is important globally, because we're actually in quite a privileged position, you know, and I'm sat here in my nice, warm and cozy house on my computer, and the situation, especially for disabled women globally, is appalling.
Right. Yeah.
And if governments in the UK and Canada are modelling the low quality of life that they seem to be putting out there, you know, this has an effect where they can ignore the UN. Well, what about places where disabled people are, you know, genocide is committed against disabled people?
Right.
And, you know, what message does that send?
Yeah.
And when will it become so unacceptable for this to happen? You know, what needs to change? And I think that I have been hugely empowered and inspired, although I don't always like the word inspired, but I genuinely have been inspired to change. So that's how I think you should use the word inspired, where we look at the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement and how that has become a global movement.
Right.
And how incredibly overdue it was, let's be honest.
Yep.
But actually gives me, although it sounds difficult to say this, in many ways it gives me quite a lot of hope, because I have seen in my daily life change. You know, I have seen conversations take place, you know, with other white people who are finally waking up to some of these issues. And, you know, I think that is something that we can take heart from, and that, you know, that's part of our work as well.
Right. Yeah.
And we have to, you know, as a disability movement, look at those intersections and, you know, really understand not just globally how disabled people live in poverty, but how, violence against especially just Black and disabled people of color in the States and across the world, and in the UK, that is a real movement, and that's a movement for change. And it is painful and hard and overdue, but my God, is it making some people wake up, and that gives me a bit of hope. It really does.
Right. Thank you. I agree. I agree. I think we need to have some sliver of hope. And you're right. These movements, Black Lives Matters, Indigenous rights around the world, women's rights around the world, disabled right there, intersectionally, we need to be pulling together. And if we're starting something here, if there's any glimmer of hope with what we're doing here, is that we're connecting, that we are now connecting with each other. And those connections are going to continue to be forged, because we have a lot of work to do to support, all groups who have been marginalized historically for such a long time, and that we are within a system of oppression that affects us all, and we have to support each other on this. So thank you for that. That's really important. It's almost 10:57, or it's almost to the hour. I wasn't sure what your time was, Amy, and how much time you can stay on for. I
think I was planning to stay on for another hour, unless you're bored of me waffling away.
No, we're not bored of you at all. I'm not, absolutely not. I think we need to continue our discussion, but I sort of want to know where else you wanted to take this discussion, because I think this, we're opening up a large range of things. But I think these are all really important. So I sort of want to know where you wanted to go next with discussion, and if there are any questions, and I'm not sure how to access questions from people who are live streaming this. That would be, oh, hang on, there's a Q&A here. Let me just check. Nope, there's not any questions there. But I invite people who are listening, who are live streaming, anyone who's on, if you have a particular question for Amy, I'm happy to bring it to her attention, and so that we can continue this really worthwhile conversation. So I'm just going to
yeah, sure,
check with my other host people who are better than this to say.
Yes, so you can go to the YouTube stream, put questions in the YouTube stream, apparently, if you're watching on the YouTube.
Okay.
Or tweet me.
Or tweet.
I've got Twitter open. Tweet me at Blonde Historian.
I think the tweets, that's a great idea. I'm also, this is Q, by the way. I am also perusing Twitter in the Disability Filibuster hashtag on my own account. I think the YouTube stream, I haven't checked today, but yesterday questions they were disabled.
I bet I can guess why.
Yeah.
Just because, Monday showed us that we have some people who are not fond of our webinar and our filibuster, but absolutely the Twitter hashtag disability filibuster I'll peruse that, and no promises to anyone, but we'll see what we can do.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I'm tweeting. I'm multitasking.
Oh my gosh! See, I'm not very good at this, Amy. So like, I'm kind of like Catherine. Like, I know so much, and then after that, someone has to tell me what to do. So it's like, I'm very newbie on this.
Well, if any of the other panelists have any questions,
right.
Even like, what socks am I wearing, or
yes, that's true. I mean, anyone can ask. Anyone can. I wanted to ask, what breed of dog was your?
Ava she's a golden retriever.
Oh my gosh.
She's very fluffy.
I have a golden retriever too.
You do?
Yes, she's a sweetie.
She's still fast asleep.
Oh,
she is. Oh no, she's woken. Me? Are you talking about me?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. She's looking up. You're talking about me.
Ava. What? What do you want? What is it? You okay? You gonna go back to your nap?
Yeah, she's saying, don't bother me. You woke me up.
Don't bother me. I've been rolling in disgusting things and I want to sleep. Is that right? Do you want a belly rub? You can let me give you a belly rub on camera. Oh, do Ava.
Oh,
Yep, there you go.
here now.
Belly rub, please.
Okay, now.
Belly rub, please.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, she's happy now.
She's very happy. She's got a big smile on.
Very happy.
It's like, you're talking at the magic box again, Mum. Don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Talking in the box here.
I suppose the two other things that I can talk about, if it's interesting, is my project with the Staying In, which is my online community that I've been running during the pandemic.
Okay.
And also an issue that we've been talking about in the UK recently. And this is a difficult subject, so we can say that we don't want to explore this, but unfortunately a young woman has recently been killed and abducted from the street. And I have been talking about, disability and feminism and the fact that disabled women get left out of these conversations, and sharing my own experiences of harassment, and that this is a conversation that needs to be had that includes disabled women, which so soon after International Women's Day is very relevant. And actually, this does intersect with your work, because the lives of disabled women and the violence against disabled women and the concerns around carer abuse or partner abuse, and how this could feature in decisions around quality of life and who's making those decisions and who has control over those decisions. So that is something I've been personally exploring. But I can talk about my online pub first, because that's a little bit more cheerful.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the Staying In, which is nearly a year old. It's a year old at the end of the month. It's going to have a birthday party. And I set it up when we went into lockdown in the UK, because, being part of this lovely disability community on Twitter, I'm used to connecting online with people. And, we all had our WhatsApp groups and stuff. And I made a joke, because I love the pub. I love a beer. I love a chat. I love to get a bit tipsy. I like to shock people in the pub by being a drunk blind lady in the pub. I love it. And it's a big cultural thing in the UK, the pub. We live in a very dark, small country, and therefore we like to have a beer. And I said to friends as a joke, oh, why don't we go to, the pub, as a joke, meaning let's have a drink on Zoom.
Right.
And it started on my kitchen table with just some friends. And then everyone had loads of fun and felt connected. And so I said, oh, well, let's make this a thing. Let's do it as a thing. And my first public event, as I believe you have experienced, got Zoom bombed by Russian teenagers who wanted to show us a lot of pornography. And that was exciting. And then over a year, I have gradually built it up, and now we have over 1,000 subscribers on our newsletter. We run events every week, pretty much. We have done 2 a week at some point, but then Amy ran out of energy. We do everything. We have a regular quiz, pub quiz. We have dance workshops. We've done disability rights sessions. We've done all sorts. We're going to do yoga. We have done a murder mystery. You name it. If we can make it work on Zoom, we make it happen. We're going to do an escape room soon. I'm excited about that.
Oh my God.
So yeah, we do a mixture of social events, well-being events, physical activities, creative activities. So we have a craft club, we have film club, we've interviewed activists. We had Haben Gurma come on, who is brilliant, and Carly Finlay, Who else have we had? Tanny Gray Thompson, the Paralympian, pops in now and then. And it has just become this joyous community of disabled people. It's run by disabled people for disabled people. I mean, anyone is welcome. But, you know, we are a disability community space, and we've had Pride, LGBTQ plus Pride events. We are planning a Black Lives Matter event. So yeah, it's been a really empowering experience. It's been a lot of hard work. We've had to fundraise, just like I'm sure you have, for, you know, access, to make sure people can access the event.
Right.
And we've raised about £16,000 now, which is roughly probably just over $20,000 US dollars. So it's been an incredible experience, and I quite like being an online landlady. It's quite fun. But it does mean that I have been able to advocate about the importance of online spaces, and particularly the importance of online spaces for disabled people. Because we all know that they're great, and we've been using them for years. Even back to those old chat rooms and everything else. And when the pandemic hit, suddenly non-disabled people, who often would say, oh, well, you know, Twitter friendships aren't real, or, you know, social media or online things, it's not real. Well, they suddenly realized that actually connecting online can be pretty damn real and really important. And as I keep pointing out whenever I talk about it, there have always been people stuck at home. You know, how many pubs have an accessible toilet? How many restaurants are step free? You know, how many places do you go to as a non-disabled person, I say, that you notice are inaccessible? How many Braille menus have you encountered? And I sort of decided that I needed to keep making this point, that this virtual world, it needs to continue. And even when we're all vaccinated and, you know, the evil pandemic is hopefully a thing of the past, there will always be a community of people that need safe, welcoming, accessible online spaces.
Right.
And I really hope that the staying in can continue, and I want it to continue. We're trying to turn it into a charity at the moment, which is quite a lot of hard work, especially during a pandemic when we're disabled people from all different parts of the country and can only meet online. The admin is a nightmare. But I want it to continue, and another kind of string we have added to our bow is we are now also offering training about how to run inclusive, accessible online events. And we delivered some training recently that raised a lot of money for us to run our other events, because all our other events are free. They're free to attend. And we pay disabled creators, we pay disabled hosts for their time. We have access professionals that we work with. And we've kind of become a community of really like trying to be as pan-disability as possible and learning from that, you know, because often there are some very conflicting access needs that you need to take into account. So things like a person who wants to lip read, but also someone who wants to see an interpreter, and how do you work out the best camera views for that? And how do you support somebody that is just joining on their mobile and is an older person who is less familiar with technology, and all these kind of, you know, barriers to participation? And, you know, thinking of ways to have events that are inclusive for everyone. So when someone turns up to the quiz and is like, I've got a picture round, and I'm like, I can't see it.
Right.
So it's been a really great journey, and I've made some fantastic friends in the process. And, you know, we now have such a strong community of people that are really passionate about it, and, you know, want to be more of a part of creating it in other parts of the world, and try and, I guess, franchise it. But obviously it's not a franchise. But yeah, it's been a really lovely experience, and I'm just sad that time zones exist and that it kind of happens mid-afternoon for the East Coast, and in the middle of the night for the West Coast. So we do often have people joining us being like, it's 4 a.m. here. Like, okay, thank you for coming. I'm a bit drunk. Like, and it's fun. It's a fun space. You have a drink, and people engage however they want. They can have their camera on. They can have it off. We have the captions in a separate browser window. Some people just click on the captions and just read the captions. We have some people that just listen and they're having a nap, or people engage however they want. And it's been really lovely to welcome people into that community and experience that solidarity when we're all going through this pandemic. And it has been a positive, the pandemic, although we do have a no COVID chat rule, because we try to keep the pandemic out as much as possible, because people don't want to always talk about it. But sometimes, when we have like rights or advocacy sessions, we do talk about it, because we want to, upskill each other and support each other. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing with that.
That sounds fantastic. I mean, talk about learning and developing collective access as you go. But you're right. I think disabled people have always been on the cutting edge of technology because of barriers in our society. So, but that just sounds like a great thing. I've written it down there, staying in. So,
staying in, it's a pun.
It's a pun, staying in, right. And so I wrote that down because I think it's really interesting. But I do acknowledge your notion of as well about raising funds to make sure things are accessible. And just to put in a little plug now for what we're doing here today, so that people, if you can remember, we have sign language interpreters, we have closed caption people, and we need to, we acknowledge and are greatly appreciative of their expertise within this forum. So if people can donate to make sure that these people can be reimbursed appropriately, we would really appreciate that. So if you're on live streaming, and if you haven't donated, any amount will help. I can't believe I'm doing a fundraising, but this is true, just for as a collective, as a process of collective access. If you can contribute to support that, we would really appreciate that. Amy, you mentioned something else about energy, and one thing that comes up with any type of activism, whatever activism it is, that there's obviously energy that people expend. People are working hard, and you don't want to get cliche about self-care, but how do you take care of yourself? How do you step away when you step away? How do you take care of yourself to be able to keep this up, or to be able to take care of yourself in times?
I am terrible for activist burnout. I need to be better is the main thing I would say. So I have recently made the decision to go freelance full time, because I was managing my activism alongside a full-time job. So I didn't really stop ever. And that, especially during the pandemic, like my partner would joke, I'd sit down at my computer at like 7 a.m. and be like, I'm going to do my activism job. And then from 9 until 6, I'll do my job. And then from 6 until 10, I'll do my activism job again. And during my lunch break, I will do some more activism job. And so that increasingly became unsustainable. Mm-hmm. And I decided to leave my paid work, because I am in a very privileged position that I can do that, and I have a partner who can support me. And I'm very lucky to do that, because I realized that doing a full-time job that I didn't really love anymore plus all the activism was going to break me.
Right.
And also I really enjoy this is what I want to do, and this is important. And so, doing these events, doing advocacy, doing training, consultancy. So now, as of this month, I'm doing it full time, which is really exciting. And I'm full of that, woohoo, freelancer energy, yay. But what do I do to relax? So I like my video games. So I stream. So that means people can, they're watching along here on YouTube, they can watch me play video games. And I can do that for hours and hours and hours. That's quite fun. So, you can hang out and watch me do that on the weekends. I love a bubble bath. Big fan of a sensory bubble bath. I know it's very wasteful, but if I could, I would have a bubble bath every day.
Mm.
There's something about being blind and being in water that is particularly uniquely lovely. I obviously now have guide dog Ava, and we go out every day, which is a big change, and I love that. And we get to walk and, go to the supermarket. The only thing we can do, I joke that I go to 3 different supermarkets a week just for something to do. One day I'll buy milk, and then the next day I'll buy eggs, and then the next day I'll buy a banana. And I get to take her to the park like we did earlier, and that was lovely, and a friend supported me to do that, all socially distanced and everything. What else do I do? I like to read. I love an audiobook. A, because they're accessible, and B, because you can do stuff. You can do the washing up, or you can be in your bubble bath listening to your audiobook.
Right. Yeah.
So I love that. What else? I love a good bit of, I tell you what is my ultimate self-care is I'll have a bubble bath, and then I will find the trashiest B horror movie that you can find. Ideally something with zombies. Big fan of zombies, big fan of vampires. Anything with it. In many ways, I'm living in my element because I love an apocalypse film.
Oh.
And if my partner would let me, I would be a prepper. I would totally do that. And actually because we did have food shortages at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, now is my time. This is what I've been preparing for my whole life, to be here in this pandemic. And my partner and we met online, and my dating profile, the last line was, I have a plan for the zombie apocalypse.
Oh.
And he was like, oh, well, I'm an engineer, so I'll be really useful. Turns out not that true. He kind of designs tunnels, and tunnel ventilation. He's not fixing anything anytime soon. And I do have a very detailed plan for what I would do in the event of a zombie apocalypse. And so I watch as many films about that as possible for research purposes. It involves our tandem bicycle and getting to the river, but that's as many details as I'm willing to give you at this time.
Okay.
You have to earn the right to get to know the full zombie apocalypse plan.
I see. Okay.
So yeah, that's a niche thing. And actually something I did recently, which I really enjoyed, is there's a great podcast called Disaster Girls.
Oh.
And they are 2 ladies in California who do detailed analysis of disaster films. And I went on and I spoke about Bird Box, which was the big Netflix Sandra Bullock film. And the premise of the film was that the evil monsters kill you by making you look at them. And I talked actually and used it as activism, because I was like, well, this blind lady, this is my apocalypse. I'd be fine. Like, where are all the blind people in that film just living their best life?
Right.
Just like walking around like, I don't even know there's an apocalypse. I'm just going to the store. So yeah, I had chatted to them about that. That was great fun. So yeah, that's one of my niche interests. There you go. Zombie apocalypses.
Oh, you have it. It sounds like you have lots of really good things that you do for yourself, and that you can move away from this for a time being and re-energize.
And I think that's really important. And I hope all of you will be doing that as well soon. Use my teacher voice there. But yeah, I think it's difficult. And I would say that the last year has been particularly hard because in my previous paid job, I was also dealing with the fallout of the pandemic and its impact on disabled people. So I just felt like I never escaped it. And my mental health suffered as a result because, you know, my every waking hour was just COVID.
Right.
And, you know, you can't do that. And it doesn't, you know, as good friends, you know, me being unwell was not going to help anyone.
Right.
Especially me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what we have to remind ourselves, that yes, we're all working really hard for change, but breaking ourselves in the process doesn't really help that change happen.
Right.
And I try to be this person as well. And to be honest, this is probably my top tip for other disability activists is I have friends that will see me doing things or committing to stuff and just go, stop it, Amy. Have a nap. Like, Amy, you're doing too much. No, you can't, you shouldn't do that. And I'll be like, oh, but this and this. And they're like, no, you need to rest. You need to look after yourself. And sometimes I think we need to be that little nagging voice for each other and just say, actually, you need to look after yourself because you're not doing that for yourself. So I'm going to step in and say, hey, have a snack, hydrate, have a nap, put on your sweatpants, watch a zombie film, relax.
Right.
And I think that's an important part of our activism for each other.
Right.
And also, more broadly, just normalizing that stuff. Like a big thing we talk about at the Staying In is, you know, join us from your bed. Like there's no shame in that. There's no shame in resting and saying, like, I am fully going to have a nap after this, right? Like I'm going to have a lovely nap.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll make some dinner and probably play some video games because we need to normalize like not toxic discussions around work.
Right.
And I think working from home and the revolution in working from home has been great for many disabled people, you know, like as we all know, hilariously, you know, we went from a situation where employers would say, oh no, you can't work remotely, to suddenly in 2 weeks, the whole world was remote.
That's right.
But the risk there is, like I said, you never step away from your desk or you never turn off your screens. And it's something my partner has experienced and I experienced. You know, when you physically had to travel to meetings, especially for disabled people, yeah, that was hard. But at least you had half an hour on the bus or, you know, an hour on the train to just be yourself and just sit and listen to your book or, you know, have a rest. Now, these virtual meetings is back to back with no breaks, no rest, no time for a wee, you know. Mm-hmm. And when I've been talking about running virtual events in an inclusive way, I do keep saying we need breaks. We need time to step away from a screen. You need to get a drink. Mm-hmm. Because even in an office environment, I mean, how much of that day are you chatting with someone at the photocopier about a football game or, you know, popping out to get a sandwich or all those like normal moments that break up the day? And yes, working from home is great because it's super accessible, but we've still got to treat our working day and our activist work like a job. and take those breaks and take a lunch hour and take time. I know this is a weird space to be saying this because you've been awake for like 48 hours or whatever, but like afterwards, look after yourselves because it's important.
Yeah. Amy, I think that's so true. I think that's really good. I'm glad to hear your lighthearted ways in which you do self-care, but I also agree with you with the fact that when we've been on this virtual environment, it has been one meeting after next, just because, oh, people can meet from, it doesn't matter where you are, you can meet.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to just take note of the fact that we do need to take a break. And I'd like to give all of us here, our sign language interpreters, yourself, our closed captioners, I think we're going to give ourselves permission to take a 10-minute break. Would that be okay? So that everyone can
Fine by me.
get a drink, go to the bathroom, just move away from their computer. So I am going to, as host, take the privilege of saying we are going to take a 10-minute break. It is 11:26, and we'll convene back at, say, let's just say 14 minutes, say 11:40 or whatever time that is for you, Amy. If you, I can't remember what time that is for you in England. So okay, so let's just take that 14-minute break and step away from the screen and do what you need to do. Have something to eat, get some tea, get some water. Maybe just go out for maybe a quick 5-minute walk if that's possible for people or not, but it's step away from the screen. And I think we will still be recording, but we'll maybe just turn off our audio and we'll come back at 11:40. Okay, Amy, thank you so much. Okay, we'll see you back there here in about 13 minutes. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Amy. We're back.
We're back.
It's Karen here. I'm just waiting for the ASL people to come back on. So Amy, so we have 20 more minutes left, and so and then there'll be a next speaker at 12. Yeah, I'll thank you again when we start up. So we're starting right now. Thank you for being on and sharing your thoughts. For the last 20 minutes, I'm wondering if there's anything else that you wanted to say relative to, for us going forward in trying to sort of kill the bill, so to say, kill this bill. And any other thoughts you might have for us that help us to what to consider, or anything you just want to add.
Well, I know you've been working incredibly hard, and so I'm sure any suggestion I would give would be pretty pointless because you'll have probably done everything. I expect you're obviously working with politicians and
Right.
Engaging around those issues, and media stories, petitions. I'm sure you've used all the standard tactics. And it's hard because they begin to feel a bit tired, don't they? Like, it feels like we've only got so many weapons in our arsenal to combat these things. I would say that in my experience of my activism, it is the stories that seem to reach people the best. It is the stories of lived experience that people react to, and it is those stories that are really powerful, and they are our voices and our experiences. And so if you can get more people to talk about those stories, I think that's where your real power lies. And to be honest, and it's really hard, and it's something that I practice in my activism, but I know that not everyone is comfortable with it. I kind of lay myself bare on Twitter quite often, but it's about people relating to us as human beings, which is like, it sucks that, we have to say that, right? Like, please understand me as a human being. But actually, around disability and attitudes to disability, that's where we face a challenge because we're either homogenized, or we're represented by other people, or we're described in ways out of our control. But actually, it's about like this movement, you know, it's owning our story and owning our truth and making people realize that they can connect with us. And I think that's something through, you know, even the staying in has been really powerful. And I always say to the non-disabled people that have become part of our community, I've said, you would never in a pub go up to a group of wheelchair users and a blind lady and like chat to us. You never would have done that. You'd have been too scared. And people are, you know, it's those basic things like having a drink together, or comparing a film you've seen, you know, chatting about, you know, whether World War Z is better than The Walking Dead for zombie representation. You know, it's those daily conversations that really connect us as human beings. And that's what we've been missing during this pandemic. And that's what worries me, because that is the power of removing us from society. And that is the power of condemning us with legislation, is because when we're not visible and when we're not part of the conversation, it's very easy to, with the stroke of a pen and a vote, put us in a box and take us out of the equation and remove us and our rights from equality and inclusion with the rest of society. And when the voices that are loudest are the privileged voices without lived experience, it's really hard to battle that narrative. But, you know, whenever people ask me, like, how do you do what you do? And I don't always really understand what I do. Like, I often describe myself as just like an angry blind lady on the internet. And, you know, when I started tweeting more earnestly about my lived experience, I didn't really expect, you know, 4 years down the line to be like, oh yes, I go on telly and I talk about this stuff. And, you know, like I didn't really expect this to be my life. But I think it is just, it's that story, it's that human story, and monopolize the incredible resource that is the activists in this community with their stories. I wrote a piece about the do not resuscitate orders and highlighted, you know, it's the small things, right? And when a person has very complex needs and very complex disabilities, and obviously I do not have that lived experience, but I have spent a lot of time with people who have more complex needs and more complex disabilities than my own. And actually it makes no difference, like, because we all find joy in something, you know. And that's what people don't understand, is that actually it doesn't matter what your disability is, because you can enjoy a bubble bath, or you love music, or you want to spend time with animals, you're passionate about World War II airplanes, you know, even if it is just the breeze on your face, we can all appreciate some joy in life together. And actually, people should learn from the pandemic that when those things are taken away from you, when that casual chat over coffee with the guy in your local cafe, or the water cooler moment at work, all those basic daily connections that many of us have been aching for, that those are denied to disabled people all the time. And that actually the solution is not to kill us. The solution is to include us and to celebrate every part of life that people participate in. Because you know what? My quality of life isn't worse because I'm blind. It's not worse because I can't see rain, or I can't recognize my own mother down the street. You know, like, I appreciate things to a much greater degree than other people in other ways, because my world is different and my experience of the world is different. And that is truly beautiful. And why aren't we celebrating that? Because I can recognize a person from the sound of their breathing. Like, it's cool, you know? And even if you don't have kind of daredevil superpowers or whatever, you know, there is the joy in everyday moments. And that's what we need to keep showing people. We need to talk about the sound of the wind through a tree, or the warmth of sunshine on your face, or the laughter when someone, you know, drops a cake, you know, all these little things that actually pretty much everyone shares, right? There are experiences that are human and universal. The feeling of holding someone's hand, of eating something you enjoy, of, you know, doing your favorite thing, whatever that favorite thing is, even if that favorite thing looks to you impossible to enjoy because of a disability. But actually, if you spend time with people who have disabilities, we live greater and richer and more beautiful lives than we're ever given credit for. And that is the story that we need to tell. And that is the connection that we need to show people. And it sucks. And it sucks that we have to keep doing it. And it is exhausting to keep telling people that we deserve to be alive and that we deserve to be included. But that is how you will reach people, in my opinion, is reminding us of those commonalities of experience. And that actually, it's not that hard to include us. It just takes a bit of thought. And at the end of the day, we all just want to live our best lives. And however we do that, we should be empowered to do it. And I think we should kill the bill. That's my rant. There you go.
That's a great way to end this segment. And we so appreciate having you on this webinar and for sharing your experiences, and to keep our energy up, as all the other speakers have done as well, keeping our energy up to keep going. And I see Catherine is on, so I just want to say, first of all, from my point of view, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to host your questions, and I've enjoyed this segment. And I'll give the last word to Catherine here, who's also now on screen. Catherine.
Thank you, Karen. And no, Amy, your words will remain and resound as the last words on this subject, whatever I may add as a PS. But so my PS is that I've had my camera off because I've been multitasking at things I do a little bit better than tech. And but you know, I've had an ear, I've been listening, and there was just a moment of fairly intense off-camera activity here, and all of a sudden your rant just pierced through, and I can't tell you how it recentered me, and how it I mean, well, you know, you're a very skilled communicator. You know how words pull people together and give us hope and make us feel like we're part of something really, really important. And you have done that. I am sure you do it every night in your pub, or every night your pub is open. And I'm not a big Twitter person, but I do hobble along in Twitter. And now that I know you're there, I will join you in the pub some night, because really you're a gift to our community. So I want to thank you. And you've certainly brought great gifts to the filibuster today.
That's really kind.
I know Karen will agree, but just what you've said at the very end there, that little clip, and I'm so glad we have a recording, because that one is viral, Amy. Yep. So thank you.
That's very, very kind. Being British, I'm very bad at taking compliments. So I will instead say that one of the questions that did come up on Twitter is, what is my favorite soup? And I would like to clarify that it is chicken noodle.
I think that's very fitting. We're all going to need a lot of that in the next few days and weeks and years.
Yeah, it's been an honor and a privilege to be here. And thank you so much for involving me. And it's just great. I love connecting with disabled activists from all over the world. And this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I hope that soon me and guide dog Ava will be touring the world and getting on planes and coming and meeting people in person when it's safe to do so again. And
looking forward to it. You've got lots of friends in Canada.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I would very much like to, being a former historian of the British Empire as well. I could have ranted on about colonial history. Just be grateful that didn't happen.
Okay. Thanks. So goodbye, Amy. And of course, you're welcome to stay. But I will hand things back over to you, Karen. And thanks for managing this amazing morning it has been for all of us.
Well, it's been my pleasure to host this morning, and especially to host Amy and everyone, Santiago and Sean, Sarah as well. So it's been really my privilege to do so. And I would like to hand over the hosting now to Q or Tracy. Okay, Q. So I like to hand that over now to her. And so everyone have a really good day. Take care.
Thank you. I'm going to lurk for a bit, but thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.